Derry, hello. It is the beginning of February 2023, and this is a chronicle of my attempts to produce a new storage solution for my home environment, professional home environment in England, and in particular moving away from the current Windows Server strategy to one based on the Apple. And I think it's worth watching if you're interested in the design of kind of semi-professional, professional storage solutions for the home. And also it might be interesting to see what the differences are between the Windows and Apple environments. The precursor to all of this is that I don't want to lose data. So in our family, we're both IT professionals and we haven't lost any data, except for two circumstances which I shall briefly touch on, in over 40 years, which means to say that on one system in this home in England, which has trundled from various different countries in the world, for example, it was in Switzerland some years ago, we have a system which is the cumulative knowledge of every document I've ever written, every photograph I've ever taken, every spreadsheet I've ever sat or every presentation I've ever made for the last 40 plus years. And the reason that's possible is that I've been able to take all the data and keep all the data and not lose any of the data. I guess the one exception would have been in the 1980s when I wrote and marketed a C compiler called the My C compiler, and I managed to lose everything except the libraries for the compiler. So in those days, compiler writing was quite a dark art, and I still have the source to the libraries that I wrote, the Unix compatible libraries, but the actual source code to the compiler is gone. So very embarrassing, and I think I thought in the 80s, well, that's never going to happen again. I'm going to make sure I have copies and backup copies, and I think that actually led to a career that included enterprise storage for my sins. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the existing Windows Server configuration. So what we have a large machine running Windows Server 2019 or later. It's got inside of it two cards, which has got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's got 8 NVMe cards, which are striped together. So these are striped together to form an 8 terabyte disk array. And whilst the write speeds could be up to 5,000 megabytes per second, that's the theoretical speed as given in, let's say, a benchmarking test. The average write speed, I would say, on a daily basis, I'm happy with 1,000 megabytes per second. And the way that this is backed up is that in the same cabinet is a spinning disk. Let's say I think it's a 12 terabyte spinning disk. And there's a process which copies, so the main work is done on this striped array, which performs very nicely. And at a period frequency of 1 day or less, the differences are compared between this array and this array. So this is supposed to be a spinning hard drive snapshot of this. And there's a process that would run, a program called sync back. And when called on a schedule, that checks all the disk data here and copies over to here the delta. So at the end of every day, if this disk array was to fail, this hard drive, this physical hard drive, would take over. And then we have the second stage, which is a NAS box, network attached storage, network attached storage. And that disk is sent to here. So we have a NAS of greater than 20 terabytes, and that is sent to there. And then thanks to the wonders of Amazon buckets, we have a cloud account, and this is, let's say, an AWS cloud. And that goes up using our superfast fiber connection to the cloud. So the idea is if the striped array fails, it gets copied to the hard drive, so I'd lose at worst one day. If someone was to come in and steal the system, then I'd probably have the NAS. If somebody was coming in and steal the main computer and the NAS, I'd have the cloud. Okay, so that's where we are. That's the current scenario that's worked well for the last at least 6 or 7 years. I think this system was built in 2017. So what's that? That's over 5 years. So this system has been running at this speed for 5 years. So it was quite something 5 years ago. Okay, so let's now look at what solutions we've got in the Apple environment. Okay, so we're going to focus on what you might use in the Apple environment. And the Apple environment is characterized by Apple's tendency and design point, which means to say that once you bought an Apple thing, you can never really upgrade it. Feel free to shout at the screen and tell me otherwise, but that's generally speaking the case. So Apple would love to sell you a computer which is non-upgradable, because then if you do need some more storage or you do need some more memory, your options are to buy another computer, which is just perfect for them. So let's look at the situation where you've got a Mac computer. We'll use a Mac Mini as the example because that's what I've got. This is a Mac Mini. So it's a very cheap Apple computer, believe it or not. And they use an interface called Thunderbolt. It's not so much used in the PC world, I would say, but they have successfully used Thunderbolt 3, now Thunderbolt 4 interfaces. And a Thunderbolt 3 interface can go up to 40 gigabits per second, I believe. So in the Apple world, you could try and configure various Apple computers with an amount of storage here, but you'd be pretty difficult to get up to 8 terabytes, and if you are lucky, you'd get to 8 terabytes, but you'd be spending an awful lot of money. So I think what most professional creators do, or most people in the Apple world do, is they externally connect Thunderbolt storage, and that's what I propose to do, what I have been doing in the last 6 months as a small scale test. So the existing test that I've been running is I've been using a TerraMaster 2-disc unit, and that's got 2 SSDs. And believe it or not, the speed that comes down this wire in practice is about 900 megabytes per second. So actually, comparing with the existing Windows system, this has been a good prototype, a good learning curve for the last 6 months, testing out whether this can be reliable. In other words, what happens if this is suddenly powered off? What happens if this is suddenly powered off? This is in fact a hardware RAID configuration. Well, it's a hardware stripe, actually. It's not RAID. It's a stripe configuration to give faster performance of these 2 SSDs. And in actual fact, it has been reliable. So in the course of 6 months of my testing, bear in mind, I don't want to lose over 40 years worth of data. That would be very foolish. This hasn't missed a heartbeat. And so now it's time to implement the full solution. And what might the full solution be? Well, in my research, there are various different vendors available. I've got them on another screen, and we'll add this into the video in a second. But we have TerraMaster, who do a 5-disc unit. So we have TerraMaster, if you like, with a 5-disc unit, 5 disc unit for SSDs of SATA. Okay, and we have a much more respected company called OWC, Otherworld Computing, and they are famous for their Mac products, and they have something called a Thunder Bay, and a Thunder Bay Mini. Again, that's a SATA interface. Or, and this is the exciting potential solution, you could have a much tinier gadget, and we have them from Star Tech. We've got JEYI, never heard of them, and OWC, and they all make a 4-bay NVMe tiny box typically, and this tiny box can store 4 drives, so that's 4 times NVMe disks. Sorry, M2 drives. M2 drives. Okay. So the choices would be to go for a SATA-based solution or an NVMe-based solution. So how might that look? This is the design for the new system. So we've got the Mac Mini. We've got some sort of 3 or 4 bay solution here. So this is a 4-disc solution. We'll talk about which one it's going to be in a minute. And then we have a second, this is a Thunderbolt interface. A second Thunderbolt interface, this is my master plan, is here. And that second Thunderbolt interface will have a single or dual spinning disc. So I've got a 2-bay TerraMaster unit. I can put a single, for example, 12 terabyte disc in there. And guess what? In the Apple world, I would say, and I've used for decades in my Apple systems, something called Carbon Copy Cloner, CCC. So that's a paid utility, and that can, on a schedule, guess what? It can examine the source drives here, and on a periodic schedule, copy to the spinning disk. So I think you can see where I'm going with this. This is the front end. We then have the NAS box here. And Carbon Copy Cloner will be on another schedule saying, take the data here and send it down. How am I going to write this? Send it down to here. And then the NAS box is running a program, and he's talking to the AWS cloud. And there's a program on the NAS box that periodically says, please, once per day or however frequently you want it to do it, send up the very fast fiber link to the cloud, the difference of my NAS into an AWS bucket. So the only real question to me is what is going to be in this disk solution. And this is where we will cut to the next part of the video. Okay, Dari, so we are now at the point where we're going to look at what's possible to order to fulfill my goal of moving from my Windows platform to an Apple-centric platform. So we've looked at the design, and now we're just trying to choose the 4-bay storage device, 4-bay or better storage device that's actually going to hold the data. Now, the most important point is that it's going to be reliable, and that's going to have a bearing actually on what we choose, but I'm going to show you what's available, and then I'm going to give you my opinion as to what I would trust and what I would not trust. Again, I've been an enterprise storage specialist for many years, and try to take that level of professionalism home with me, because neither your customers nor your friends and family appreciate losing data. And if you, for example, lost a lifetime's worth of photographs, you'd be a pretty unpopular person, especially if you've scanned the originals and then actually shredded all the originals, so you haven't got any originals left, so to speak. So with that gruesome thought in the back of your mind, we'll look at the first candidate, which is the TerraMaster D5. So this is a £600, so cost is important. We don't have unlimited funds. But by the same token, we want to have something that actually works reliably. That's the most important point. It has to have the design criteria of 1,000 megabytes per second. TerraMaster offers a direct attached Thunderbolt 3 connected storage device. It's kind of similar to the 2-bay one that I've got, except that this doesn't have any hardware RAID that's switchable on the back of the device. It does apparently have a hardware RAID chip inside the chassis, and you talk to it via a software program that you install on your Apple computer. So this is a 5-bay device. Each bay can be 2.5 or 3.5 inch SATA. Let's look at the SATA ones first. So here is the OWC Thunderbay 4. This is a 4-bay storage device. It's £700, and in this you can have again 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch drives, and the RAID is purely by soft RAID. So my understanding is that this device does not have any hardware in it whatsoever, and all the RAID 5ing, for example, will be done via a software side program sitting on your Apple computer. Okay. And what happened there? You think that? We're back. Yeah, we're back. Okay, so that's the OWC Thunderbay. It's about £660. The next is the OWC Thunderbay Mini. This only takes 2.5 inch drives, SSDs, preferentially SATA. Again, this can go past the 1,000 megabytes per second and can have a capacity of up to 4 drives, and is only £365, and that includes the £100 for the soft RAID software. And more interestingly, in a way, the other way of doing this would be to have NVMe 2 disks. So in the cases I've quoted, first of all, you're going to stuff, I would say, 4 terabyte SATA SSDs into one of those 3 devices, the TerraMaster or the OWC Thunderbay or the Thunderbay Mini. I think I would go for about 12 terabytes, so that's 3 disks. Now they're not going to be RAIDed, but they are going to have this copy that's to a separate physical disk, let's say once per day. So the idea is that in order to get the speed, you wouldn't use RAID. And also, having an external RAID can be quite a dodgy thing. We'll come on to that in a second, but let's just look at the other possibilities. So for the other 4-bay devices that I've been researching, there's a Sonic device as well, which is possibly the most professional amongst all of these, but that's way beyond the price point. That's about £2,000 for the chassis, and I think that's beyond my consideration here. That's without adding the drives in. We have the OWC Express 4-bay NVMe M2 chassis, again at £364. This is a tiny device with, by all accounts, a very noisy fan. So on the plus side, it's tiny, but on the negative side, so you can see how small that is. That's a barrel. You can see the barrel plug, and you can see the size of the USB-C interfaces there, the Thunderbolt interfaces. That is very small. So the plus point is beautifully small. On the negative side, it's got a fan to cool the up to 4 drives, and that fan is extremely noisy. There's been some people are very clever, and they've 3D printed a larger fan bracket and bought a bigger fan. That's their solution. Meanwhile, we have two other companies who believe that there's no need for a fan. So unbelievably, we have two companies, StarTech, which is quite a well-known company, and JEYI, who I've never heard of in my life. Now, I wouldn't buy this product anyway because it's coming from the US and it's got import fees. And if this went wrong, I don't know how you'd return it. Maybe Amazon would allow you to return it, but returning this item could be complicated. So I think that would rule it out. But neither of these items have a fan, and I honestly cannot believe they don't have a fan, but apparently they don't have a fan. So I'm kind of astonished. I have put a question into Amazon to the suppliers to say, doesn't this overheat? I mean, in a quick benchmark, a YouTuber might buy this device and stuff it full of four discs and do a quick benchmark. But unless they do a proper extended benchmark when they're working with video and exporting a video, and let's say transferring, let's say, a terabyte of data and intensively working with data, they're not going to stress these devices. So you might be in a situation whereby you buy this device based on some YouTuber's recommendation, but when you actually start to use it in action, it just completely overheats. So I have no confidence that either of these devices will behave reliably under load. I have no evidence to say that they would work under load. I think they might work fine for occasional use, but if you're buying these for occasional use, do you really need something like 1500 megabytes per second disk speed? I think not. The other thing that in my web research I found out is that any of these products that use NVMe 2 drives, if they have a sudden disconnection from the power for any reason, you are at severe risk of corrupting your disk array. Now, this doesn't seem to be the case with a SATA-based disk product, but there have been numerous people who, if you search on the forums for any of these three devices, saying that if there's a power cut, then these devices are the ones not to be having. So much so that the recommendation is to have an uninterruptible power supply behind these disk units. And of course, that's big and bulky, and in your office, it's going to be another consideration. That might have its own fan. So the overall solution I've decided is not to use the NVMe disks. I would have liked to have used the NVMe disks, but from a cost point of view, they are prohibitively expensive. And from the point of view of reliability, it seems that all the reports that I've looked at have said that this is a really, really not terribly reliable solution. And I go back to the original point that if you are wanting to safeguard your data and you've got a lot of data, you've got 10 terabytes of data which you do not want to lose. In my case, it's got decades worth of personal information and all the projects I've ever worked on. I don't want to lose that data. I don't want to have to be in a big restore situation. Because how do you check 2 million files or 5 million files? It's pretty difficult. So I think that the way to go is, I'm afraid, kind of yesterday's technology, which is SSD-based SATA in a striped configuration. And I'll just show you, by the way, I've got some of the costs here. Can I drag that on the screen and show everybody the costs? I think I can. So I'll put this in the accompanying WordPress article, of course. So here are the base costs of the drives. We've got the 4 terabyte Samsung. So I'm trying to use quality components here. 4 terabyte Samsung product here is about 300 UK pounds each. A 4 terabyte NVMe top of the line Sabrent NVMe drive is £700. So if we look at the 4M2 solution, that's NVMe solution, then that comes out at £2,500. Wow. If we look at the static NVMe, again, it's about £2,500 because the disk price is the dominating factor. The JEYI jelly or JE product, which is again, never heard of them, and that comes out at £2,300. The Thunder Bay, using the SATA technology for 3 drives, comes out at $1,548. And I think the one that I'm going to go for is the Thunder Bay 4 Mini. It's physically the smallest product. It's from a well-known company, OWC. The SSDs are quality SSDs from Samsung, and the price there is just over £1,000. Now, the other point is, why not to use TerraMaster? Well, I've currently got a TerraMaster dual bay unit. TerraMaster support, well, first of all, TerraMaster documentation is appalling. Don't take my word for it. Go to the website and have a look. I already have a support call on the 2-disc bay unit that I bought, which has 1 or 2 faults with it. It's working fine as a disc unit, but it also has an Ethernet port and 2 USBs, and the Ethernet port doesn't work. And I raised some support issue with TerraMaster, and they were initially very enthusiastic. They proved that they'd solved it, and then I proved that they didn't really know what they were talking about. And since that moment, since I got back to them saying, I'm afraid you haven't proved that it works, I have been totally silent on the issue. I must get back to them. It's been at least a month now since I've raised this fault with their Ethernet out on the 2-bay unit that I've got, and there's been not a dicky bird from them. So my personal experience with TerraMaster has been poor in terms of support. If you go to YouTube channels, if you go to forums, you'll also see that they are not held in the highest regard. So of the 2 solutions that I was possibly considering, the Thunder Bay Mini solution is the thing I'm going to go for. This is very tempting because it's a 5-bay unit with hardware RAID, whereas this is a 4-bay unit without any hardware RAID. And of course, what you really want is hardware RAID. And the question is, do you trust TerraMaster's hardware RAID, or do you have something perhaps slightly slower with OWC's Thunder Bay 4 Mini and the soft RAID? And I'm afraid, again, I have to err on the side of caution. It's a lifetime's worth of data, and again, if you're dealing with large amounts of data, it's not transient data. You need something that's reliable. So I'm afraid TerraMaster, I don't think I can recommend you. I am going to go with the Thunder Bay 4 Mini. Okay, I think I've jabbered on for quite a while there. I hope what I've said is a little bit interesting and might guide you into thoughts about making your own home direct attached storage array, and furthermore having a hierarchy of storage so that in any failure scenario you can actually get your data back. But the first rule is to design something that's bulletproof, or as bulletproof as it can be. Your recovery scenario might be that someone came in and stole the unit, not that it broke down. Okay, Darren, that'll be it for now.